I still remember that morning like a scar that never fades. The sun had barely risen when Angela barged into the living room, suitcase open, clothes flying inside it as if the world was on fire. I thought she was packing for one of her usual short trips, but then she turned to me with a strange excitement in her eyes. "Mom," she said breathlessly, "start packing your things." I blinked. "Packing what? What's happening?" She zipped her bag with a sharp jerk. "We're leaving tomorrow. I've sold your beach house." For a moment, I forgot how to breathe. What? The words stumbled out of my mouth. Angela rolled her eyes as if I were being dramatic. "The beach house, Mom. It's gone. Sold. And don't look at me like that Ty did it for you. You need the money. You don't need that old place anyway." My heart dropped into a silence so heavy, I could hear it echoing in my ears. That house wasn't just wood and paint. It was where Robert and I raised Angela, where she learned to walk on warm sand, where Robert taught her to swim, where our family's laughter lived. And she sold it. Without asking me, without even telling me, without thinking about what it meant to me. I sank into the chair, my knees trembling. "Angela, you had no right." She waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, come on, Mom. You always overreact. Besides, you signed those papers months ago, remember?" I showed them to the agent. Everything was legal. I remembered that day. Robert had just died. My eyes were swollen, hands shaking. Angela had placed document after document in front of me. "Just sign, Mom," she had said. "It's for handling the funeral." But they weren't just funeral papers. No, they were power of attorney. She used my grief as her signature. At that moment, she didn't look like my daughter. She looked like a stranger wearing her face. "Angela," I whispered, "why would you do this?" She sighed impatiently. "Because we need the money. Edward and I are moving to Europe for a big opportunity, and we can't drag you along unless we have enough saved. Now stop worrying and pack." "Pack for what?" "Pack to go where?" "With her." The same daughter who had just ripped out a piece of my history. I watched her leave the room, still mumbling about flights and plans, completely unaware that with every word, she was carving a deeper wound into me. What she didn't know was, I wasn't the weak, broken widow she assumed I was. 2 nights earlier, while she and Edward slept soundly in the next room, I had opened Robert's final letter, the envelope hidden in his old toolbox. Inside were documents that changed everything. Multiple properties, investments, shares. All in my name. All protected. Angela didn't know any of it existed. She didn't know her sale of the beach house was invalid, didn't know the law was on my side. She didn't know I had already met with Robert's lawyer, that he was helping me reclaim everything quietly, and that her betrayal had awakened a strength in me I didn't know survived the grief. She didn't know the house she sold wasn't legally hers to touch. She didn't know I was taking back every property, every document, every piece of my life, but she was about to find out. That night, I sat in my room while Angela laughed on the phone with her husband, planning her new life without knowing the foundation beneath her was already cracking. I opened Robert's envelope again, brushing my fingers over his handwriting. "Antonia, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But I left you prepared. Don't let them take what I built for us." A tear escaped before I could stop it. "Don't worry, Robert," I whispered. "I won't." The next morning, Angela smirked and tossed a small bag toward me. "Mom, hurry. We leave in a few hours." I looked at the bag. Then at her. And for the first time in months, I smiled back, a smile she completely misunderstood, because what she didn't know was, I wasn't going anywhere, but she was. Straight into the consequences of her own choices. The hours after Angela announced her grand plan passed like a storm I had to walk through without letting myself get soaked. She moved around the house with an air of triumph, humming, calling Edward every 10 minutes, telling him how everything was finally falling into place. She had no idea that the pieces she thought she controlled were already slipping from her fingers. That night, after she went to bed, I stayed awake with the small lamp on, staring at the envelope Robert left me. His handwriting, steady and confident, felt like a lifeline. I remembered the way he used to sign his letters when he traveled for work. "Just in case you ever need proof, I still love you." I placed the documents back inside the envelope and hid it under the loose floorboard he once repaired. A secret returning to a secret place. In the silence of the house, where every clock tick sounded louder than it should, I whispered to myself, "Tomorrow, everything changes." Angela thought she was dragging me to Europe like discarded luggage, but I wasn't going anywhere. I had already set my own plans in motion. Angela came down the stairs at dawn, her hair tied in a ponytail, face glowing with excitement. She looked like a child opening gifts on her birthday, except the gift she thought she had taken wasn't hers to keep. "Mom," she said cheerfully, "you're not ready yet. The taxi will come at 9. Pack only your essentials. We can buy everything else there." I smiled, a smile she mistook for confusion. "I will pack," I said softly. But inside, a wave of strength steadied me. I was done being her shadow. She didn't notice anything when I slipped my old handbag onto my arm and walked out the door. She was too busy calling Edward, too busy talking about Europe, about fresh starts, about how easy it was to handle things when you didn't tell your mother what you were doing. The taxi wasn't coming for me. It was coming for her fate. I reached Mr. Peterson's office just as he arrived. He adjusted his glasses, surprised to see me waiting by the entrance. "Mrs. Brooks, you're early. I need to finish what we started," I told him. We went inside. The sun filtered through tall windows, drawing golden lines across the marble floor. Robert always liked this building. He said it felt honest. I finally understood what he meant. Mr. Peterson opened a file on his desk and passed it to me. "Everything is ready. Once you sign these, you'll have regained full authority over all your assets, properties, bank accounts, shares, including the beach house." A warmth spread through my chest. Finally, something that belonged to me was returning home. "And the building?" I asked. He cleared his throat. "It is now fully under your direct ownership. Angela and Edward have no legal standing there anymore." The words felt like air after drowning. For the first time in months, I breathed without fear. I signed the documents with steady hands. "Mrs. Brooks, Angela won't react well," he warned. "I am aware," I replied, "but she chose this path." At noon, while I was still in Mr. Peterson's office, my phone buzzed with 3 missed calls from Aurora, my neighbor. When I called her back, she didn't even say hello. "Antonia, goodness, I've been trying to reach you. The police were at your daughter's building." My breath caught. "What happened?" "They wanted to speak with Edward about some unpaid loans. Apparently the bank found out something wasn't right with the papers he submitted." My heart hardened, so that part of Robert's documents was true. "And Angela?" I asked. "Sweetheart, she came back." I froze. "So soon?" "Yes, she arrived an hour ago, looking furious, dragging her luggage behind her. She stormed into the building shouting at the guards, something about needing access." I pressed my fingers to my forehead. She had returned earlier than planned. Maybe Edward called her about the bank trouble. Maybe her perfect plan was showing its first cracks. Either way, she was back and she didn't expect what awaited her. "I'll be home soon," I said to Aurora. When I reached my street, I saw Angela standing outside my house, arms crossed, tapping her foot on the sidewalk. The moment she saw me, she ran up with panic in her eyes. "Mom, where were you?" "I searched the whole neighborhood. I had things to do," I answered calmly. She stared at me. "Did you forget our flight? We were supposed to leave hours ago." I looked at her luggage. "Angela, I'm not going anywhere." Her eyebrows shot up. Double quotes. "Yes, you are. You don't have a choice." "Mom, we have to go before." She stopped mid-sentence. Fear flickered in her eyes. Something she hadn't planned was happening. "Before what?" I asked quietly. She swallowed hard. Before everything becomes more complicated. I'll explain on the plane." "I'm not boarding any plane," I said. She threw her hands in the air. "Why are you being difficult? You need me." "No," I whispered. "You needed me. And you only remembered that when you needed my signature." Her face went pale. A black car turned into the street and stopped in front of us. Mr. Peterson stepped out, holding a sealed envelope. Angela looked at him and frowned. "Who's that?" "My attorney," I said. Her confusion turned into unease. He handed her the envelope. "For Mrs. Angela Edwards." She ripped it open without thinking. Her eyes flew across the page, then her mouth opened in horror. "This is an eviction notice," she gasped. "You're kicking me out of my own home." I met her panicked eyes with calm resolve. "It was never your home, Angela. You never owned it. You never paid for it. You signed nothing. Your name was never on the deeds." "That's impossible," she shouted. Edward, I cut her off, was paying loans on a property he did not own. The bank knows. They will contact him." Her face collapsed. "And the beach house," she whispered. "It was never yours to sell." She shook her head violently. No, I sold it. You sold something you had no right to touch. I stepped closer, and for the first time, she took a step back. What you didn't know, I said, is that your father left everything in my name, and I have reclaimed every single property. Her hands trembled. Mom, please, don't do this. This is the result of what you did, I replied. You lied to me. You used my grief. You stole from me. Her chin quivered, but her voice was small. Where am I supposed to go? I swallowed the lump in my throat. That's something you and your husband will have to figure out. She took a shaky breath and looked at the letter again, as if hoping the ink would change, but it didn't. Her world was finally showing her what she had done, and that was only the beginning. The next morning carried a strange electricity in the air, quiet, heavy, as if the world itself knew things were beginning to shift. I woke up earlier than usual, the sunlight still soft, stretching like pale ribbons across my bedroom floor. For a moment, I just sat on the edge of my bed, feeling the wooden frame beneath my hands. It was the same bed Robert and I had shared for decades, the same bed where we whispered secrets, made plans, and comforted each other through every storm life sent our way. But today, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel broken. I felt awake. Aurora's words from the previous day echoed in my mind about the bank troubles, the investigation, the loans. Everything was unraveling much faster than I had imagined. The universe had a strange sense of timing. Angela believed she had escaped, living the good life in Europe, but storms were already forming behind her. She didn't know the ground beneath her feet was cracking, and she certainly didn't expect the woman she had betrayed to be the one pulling the strings. I got dressed, made coffee, and watched the steam rise from the mug. For a moment, I closed my eyes and imagined Robert sitting across from me, smiling with that soft, patient expression he wore only for me. Well done. I imagined him saying, "You're finally standing up. You're finally seeing what you deserve." I smiled faintly. Then the phone rang. My heart tightened, thinking it might be Angela, but the screen showed a familiar number. Mr. Peterson. I picked up immediately. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, "I have more updates. May I come by this afternoon?" "Yes, of course." His tone felt heavier than usual, careful, almost hesitant. That alone told me the news had weight. After hanging up, I cleaned my kitchen, not because it needed cleaning, but because I needed something to keep my hands busy. A strange mixture of anxiety and anticipation twisted inside my chest. By noon, I heard his car pull into my driveway. He walked in with a briefcase in hand, nodding politely before sitting at the table. I poured us coffee the same way I used to do for Robert and his coworkers. On the mornings they carpooled. Mrs. Brooks, he began, opening the briefcase slowly. "The situation with your daughter is more complicated than we expected." I raised an eyebrow. "I assumed as much. Tell me." He took a deep breath. "Edward's financial trouble is far more serious. The bank has officially frozen his accounts. He owes several lenders money, a large amount." I sipped my coffee. Calm, steady, and Angela. "She is tied to some of those loans." Of course she was. Angela had always trusted Edward blindly, or rather, she trusted his dreams blindly, his big ideas, his plans that never quite took off, and she always expected me or Robert to clean up the mess, but not this time. "Mrs. Brooks," he continued, "we have another issue. I received a call this morning from the airline." "The airline?" I frowned. "Why would the airline contact you?" "Because Angela listed you as her emergency contact. They needed to inform you that the couple has returned." My heart stopped. Last night, a cold chill ran down my spine. They were back. They were already here, and they hadn't called me, not even to pretend to care. "Where are they now?" I asked. "In your building," he said gently. "Things must have gone badly in Europe, very badly." I nodded, my fingers tightening around the mug. That it was happening. Every lie, every betrayal, every selfish decision, they were all coming home to roost. Mr. Peterson slid some papers toward me. "These are the finalized ownership documents. You now have full and complete legal control of the building. What you choose to do next is entirely in your hands." He looked at me with a mixture of admiration and concern. "If I may speak honestly," he said quietly, "your daughter is about to face consequences, real consequences, in a way she never has before. This won't be easy." "I don't expect it to be easy," I replied, "but it's necessary." He nodded, closing his briefcase. "I'll send the eviction notice whenever you're ready." After he left, I sat alone for a long while, staring at the documents in front of me. Ownership papers, legal rights, authority, power I never asked for, but power Robert had left for me deliberately, thoughtfully. He knew I would need it someday. He knew our daughter better than I ever allowed myself to believe. As afternoon shifted into early evening, I heard a car door slam outside, then voices, familiar voices. I stood up and slowly walked to the window. There she was, Angela, my daughter, my blood. A stranger in many ways. Her hair was messy, her clothes wrinkled, her eyes puffy. She looked exhausted physically, emotionally, financially. She was dragging a suitcase that looked far heavier than it should, while Edward stood behind her with the same arrogant posture he always carried. Even though he was clearly defeated, I watched them argue quietly as they approached their apartment building. Even from across the distance, I could see the tension, the panic, the realization that their European dream had fallen apart. Angela glanced toward my house for a split second, but she didn't wave, she didn't smile, she didn't even soften. She looked away quickly, as if the sight of me reminded her of what she had done or what she believed she had successfully gotten away with. I stepped back from the window and pressed my hand against my chest, breathing slowly through the ache that followed. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was something deeper, a sadness so profound it felt like it was carving a new space inside me. After everything she had done, everything she had taken, seeing her like that didn't give me joy. It didn't make me feel victorious. It made me realize how deeply she had lost herself. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked through the house barefoot, touching walls, shelves, picture frames. When I reached the old photo of Angela sitting on Robert's lap as a child, I felt tears gather in my throat. "Where did you go wrong?" I whispered to the picture. Where did I go wrong? The house felt too quiet, too heavy, as if the walls were holding their breath with me. At midnight, my phone lit up, Angela calling. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. I didn't answer. She didn't deserve immediate access to me anymore. But curiosity won. I let it ring again. Then, I picked up. Her voice came through small, nothing like the cold tone she used the day she robbed me. "Mom, can we talk?" There it was. The beginning of the unraveling, the first crack in her armor. I didn't respond right away. "Mom," she repeated, sounding more desperate now. "Please." I took a slow breath. "Not tonight, Angela." Silence. A stunned silence. "Mom, please, we're dealing with something. We need help." I closed my eyes. Of course, now she wanted me. "Tomorrow," I said calmly. "We'll talk tomorrow." And then I hung up. I stood in the dark kitchen, the quiet ringing in my ears like distant thunder. Tomorrow, she would come. Tomorrow, she would ask. Tomorrow, she would face the truth. And she had no idea. Tomorrow, she would receive her eviction notice. The next morning arrived with a strange stillness, almost as if the city itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was about to unfold. I woke early, as usual. Before the sun had fully risen, the house was quiet except for the faint ticking of the clock, a familiar rhythm that somehow felt like a heartbeat guiding me forward. I made coffee, letting the warm aroma fill the kitchen, and placed Robert's documents neatly on the table. Today was the day. Today Angela would begin to understand the consequences of her actions. I dressed carefully. Selecting the wine-colored dress Robert always said made me look regal. I wanted to see the shock on her face, but I also wanted to feel the strength of a woman who had reclaimed her life. I touched my hair lightly in the mirror, and for the first time in months, I didn't see a widow. I saw a woman who had been underestimated and who was about to prove that underestimation deadly wrong. The phone rang just as I was pouring the last drops of coffee. It was Mr. Peterson. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, his voice calm but tinged with urgency. "I have everything prepared. Are you ready for Angela's return?" "I'm ready," I said firmly. "Send the notice when she's here. Let her see the reality of her choices." He agreed, and I hung up. My heartbeat quickened not out of fear, but anticipation. This was justice, carefully and elegantly orchestrated. It wasn't long before I heard the distant rumble of a car approaching. Looking through the curtains, I saw the familiar figures, Angela and Edward, returning from Europe, looking far less confident than they had just hours ago. Angela carried her designer suitcase with an awkward stiffness, a forced smile on her lips that didn't reach her eyes. Edward followed, looking more worn than I had ever seen him, his expensive jacket wrinkled, his tie loose. I opened the front door as they approached. Standing tall and calm, Angela froze for a moment when she saw me. That pause, just a half second, was everything. I could see it in her eyes. A flicker of doubt, a glimmer of fear. She had believed I was powerless. She had believed she had taken everything. She had been wrong. Mom, she began nervously. Angela, I interrupted, my voice calm but carrying weight. I hope you brought a good explanation for what you did. Her hands shook slightly. We had to, Mom. You don't understand. The investment's Edward's plans. We needed the money. You thought, I repeated slowly, savoring each word, that you could take, lie, and manipulate me without consequences. And for months, you believed you had succeeded, but the truth always finds a way to surface. Her eyes widened. Something in her stomach shifted, the realization that she was standing before a version of me she had never faced. A strong, confident, unwavering Antonia Brooks, the mother she thought she could bully, manipulate, and deceive, no longer existed. That woman had been replaced by someone who understood power, strategy, and the law, someone who had inherited Robert's foresight and her own strength. I motioned to the envelope Mr. Peterson had delivered to my table. This, I said slowly, deliberately, is your reality. Angela glanced at the paper, her face blanching as she read. Her eyes darted from the words to me and back again, her mouth opening and closing like a fish struggling for air. You can't, she cried. Mom, this is our home. Edward, this isn't fair. I felt a strange calm as I watched her crumble. No, Angela, it's not your home. It never was. Every document you signed, every claim you thought was yours, was legally invalid. Every property Robert worked for, every investment he protected, every ounce of wealth you thought you had access to, belongs to me. Edward stepped forward, his expression angry and panicked. We can fix this, Mom. Please. We didn't know you did know, I said sharply, and you chose greed over family. You chose deceit over love. And now you face the consequences. Angela's legs weakened, and she sank to the nearest chair. The weight of reality pressed down on her like a physical force. The smugness, the entitlement, the arrogance, all of it stripped away by truth. I took a deep breath, letting the silence stretch. It was a silence filled with tension, heartbreak, and justice. Tears rolled down Angela's face. Mom, I was only trying to help, only trying to secure our future. I didn't know. I didn't. You did, I said, voice steady and firm. You knew exactly what you were doing. You used my grief to your advantage, and you treated me like I was nothing. For 45 years, I raised you, sacrificed for you, loved you without condition, and this is what I received in return. Edward's hands clenched into fists. She doesn't understand, Mom. The market crashed. The investors, I understand perfectly. I interrupted. I understand that every word you spoke, every plan you made, was self-serving. You thought you were clever. You thought you were untouchable. But you forgot one thing. I am Robert's widow. And I am also Antonia Brooks. The words hung in the air. Angela's sobs grew quieter, her body trembling with a mixture of fear, shame, and despair. Edward's face paled as the gravity of the situation began to sink in. The loans, the debts, the frozen accounts, consequences of their choices were coming home. I leaned closer to Angela, my voice softer now, almost gentle. I am not cruel, Angela. I am not punishing you out of anger. I am showing you the truth. Life is not always fair. Sometimes, the people who seem the weakest are the strongest. And sometimes, those who seem invincible fall hardest. Angela looked at me, and in that moment, I saw a glimmer of the little girl she had been, the girl who built sandcastles on our beach, who ran through the waves laughing, who used to sit on Robert's lap and trust the world. That child had been buried beneath greed and ambition, but a small spark remained. She whispered, almost inaudibly, Mom, I'm sorry. It was the first time she had spoken with honesty since she stole what was mine, but words alone were not enough. You will have time to make amends, I said. But understand this, every action has a consequence, and from now on, I make the rules. Edward sank into a chair beside her, defeated, silent. The dream they had chased across the ocean had evaporated, and standing here, I realized something profound. Revenge was not the goal. Justice was. Restoration was. The life Robert and I built, the legacy we protected, could not be stolen, not by my daughter, not by anyone. That evening, as Angela and Edward sat in stunned silence, I poured myself a cup of tea. I sat by the window, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of red and gold. There was a beauty to this moment, a satisfaction that went beyond money or property. I had stood tall, I had reclaimed my life, and most importantly, I had shown Angela what it meant to betray someone and face the truth. Robert's words whispered in my mind, "Don't let them take what I built for us." And I hadn't. As night fell, I felt a sense of calm and purpose. This was only the beginning, but I was ready. I would protect what was mine. I would teach lessons where necessary, and through it all, I would remain the woman Robert knew I could be. The days after Angela and Edward returned were a strange mix of tension and silent warfare. The house felt alive in a new way, not the quiet, grief-laden space I had wandered through 4 months, but a space buzzing with strategy, anticipation, and the slow, inevitable realization that the balance of power had shifted. Every room I walked into felt like a command center. Every document on my desk, a weapon. Every phone call, a step closer to restoring justice. I woke early, as I had done since reclaiming control of my properties. The sun streamed through the curtains, soft and warm, but it felt different today, as if it were highlighting not just the start of a new day, but the start of a new era. I brewed my coffee, poured it into my favorite cup, and sat at the table with the envelopes of deeds and bank statements laid before me. Robert's handwriting seemed to watch me from every page, a silent reassurance that I was not alone in this fight. Aurora, my lifelong neighbor, knocked lightly at the door mid-morning. She peeked inside, concern written all over her face. "Antonia, dear, how are you holding up?" she asked gently. I smiled faintly, masking the storm brewing within me. "I'm fine, Aurora. Thank you for asking, really." Her brow furrowed slightly. "I know things must be hard. With Angela and Edward returning, I thought, they're learning a lesson, Aurora. And lessons can be harsh, but necessary." Her eyes widened slightly, curiosity and fear mingling. "Oh, I see. Well, you know where I am, if you need anything." I nodded, and she left, shaking her head with a mix of pity and intrigue. The entire neighborhood had been playing their roles, some whispering sympathy, some curious. All unaware of the storm I was quietly orchestrating behind closed doors. I had become a master of dual lives, the fragile widow in the morning, the calculating strategist in the afternoon, and I had never felt more alive by mid-afternoon. I decided it was time to take action. I wanted to see their faces not just from the window, but up close, to feel the shift of fear, confusion, and realization in real time. I walked slowly to the building where Angela and Edward lived, carrying nothing but my dignity and the quiet knowledge of my rightful ownership. When I stepped into the lobby, Edward looked up first. His eyes widened as they met mine. Angela, standing behind him, froze completely. The arrogance and entitlement that had carried them across the Atlantic had vanished, replaced by raw vulnerability. They truly realized that their mother, the woman they had tried to manipulate, now held every card. "Mom," Angela began, her voice trembling. "Angela," I said, my tone calm but firm, "we need to talk, alone." Edward's jaw tightened. He wanted to argue, to intervene, to maintain some semblance of control, but even he knew he was powerless. Slowly, he sank into the nearest chair, watching as his wife, the daughter who had once been confident, strong, and cunning, hesitated before stepping forward. I led Angela into the empty apartment, the walls echoing the memories of her childhood, the laughter, the chaos, the love she had once taken for granted. I gestured for her to sit, and she obeyed, every movement betraying a mixture of fear, guilt, and shame. "Angela," I began, carefully choosing each word, "do you remember the day I first taught you to save your allowance? Do you remember the summers at the beach house, the birthdays, the Christmases, every meal we shared, every sacrifice we made?" Her eyes welled with tears. She nodded faintly, the memories resurfacing in stark contrast to the greedy woman she had become. "I sold nothing to strangers. I gave nothing away," I continued. "Everything Robert and I built, everything I am entitled to remains mine. The beach house, the properties, the money, every penny. And now, so do you. You just have to learn how to respect it." Angela's shoulders shook. "Mom, I didn't know. I didn't think you didn't think," I repeated, voice steady, almost cruel in its precision. "For 45 years, I thought of you. Every need, every want, every dream. I sacrificed. I raised you. I gave you love, guidance, patience. And for what? A phone call, a signature. And suddenly I was nothing to you." Her lips trembled, but no words came. Edward finally spoke. voice weak and defeated. We didn't mean to. You didn't mean anything, I interrupted, cutting him off. You acted, you manipulated, you used your mother's grief and naivety to fund your dreams, and now you're paying the price. Just then, my phone rang. The screen displayed an unfamiliar number, one of the banks where Edward had taken his loans. I picked it up. Double quotes, Mrs. Brooks. The bank representative said, "We are contacting you regarding loans associated with your daughter and son-in-law's account. We have discovered discrepancies and fraudulent use of your properties as collateral. They have no legal right to borrow against these assets. We require immediate clarification." I smiled faintly, listening as the panic in the representative's voice confirmed what I already knew. The world was finally catching up with their lies. "Yes," I said, "everything is under control. The properties are mine, legally and fully. I will handle it." Angela's eyes went wide as she realized she had no backup. Edward's face paled. They were trapped in their own deception, the lies they had built unraveling around them. I took a seat across from Angela, leaning forward slightly. "Do you understand now?" I asked softly. She nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. I didn't know, Mom. I never knew." "You knew," I corrected her. "You just ignored it. You took what you wanted without considering the consequences. But life has a way of teaching us the lessons we refuse to learn willingly. And now, Angela, it is time for you to truly understand respect, accountability, and humility." She nodded again, this time more earnestly. Edward remained silent, staring at the floor, defeated, as if the weight of his own failures was crushing him. I poured myself a cup of tea and sipped slowly. For the first time in months, I felt calm, complete, in control. The storm had arrived, and I was not its victim. I was its orchestrator. Over the next week, I worked quietly but relentlessly to ensure my legal control was absolute. Mr. Peterson coordinated with the banks, nullified Edward's fraudulent loans, and reinstated my ownership of all properties, including the building where they lived. Each day, I watched Angela transform before my eyes. Gone was the arrogant, entitled girl. In her place, a humbled woman faced the consequences of her choices. She still had much to learn, but she was learning, painfully, undeniably, and entirely under my supervision. I maintained appearances with the neighborhood, still playing the fragile widow by morning, still performing the simple acts of humility and vulnerability that no one questioned. But in the afternoons, I was relentless, meticulous, unstoppable. I was no longer a passive victim of circumstance. I was the architect of justice, the silent guardian of my family's legacy. And deep down, I knew the ultimate lesson had already begun to take root. Angela's heart, once cold and calculated, had felt the first pangs of fear and humility. And Edward, the man who had never respected me, had finally realized the power that comes with true foresight, patience, and wisdom. The days after the bank's call were unlike any I had ever experienced. A strange calmness settled over the city, as if the universe itself had paused to witness the shift in balance. I had reclaimed what was mine, but the journey was far from over. Angela and Edward were learning the hard way that deception has consequences, and their arrogance had finally collided with reality. I woke early, as I had become accustomed, the familiar rhythm of the house providing a comforting backdrop. Robert's presence lingered in every corner, not as a shadow but as a guide, reminding me of the life we had built together. I brewed my coffee and sat at the kitchen table, reviewing the documents Mr. Peterson had prepared. Each paper represented a piece of justice, meticulously crafted to ensure that what Angela had tried to steal could never be taken from me again. I decided it was time for a direct confrontation, not one from a distance, not one mediated by lawyers or documents, but a face-to-face reckoning. I walked to the building where Angela and Edward lived, each step deliberate, my posture straight and unyielding. Today, I would ensure they understood the full weight of their actions. As I entered the lobby, Edward's face drained of color. Angela froze, clutching her bag as if it were a lifeline. The air was thick with tension, every second stretching into eternity. Angela began, her voice faltering. "Angela," I interrupted, calm and commanding, "we need to have a serious conversation." "Alone," Edward wanted to interject, to argue, to reclaim some semblance of control, but the fire in my eyes, the authority in my voice, made him hesitate. He stepped aside, muttering under his breath, and allowed his wife to follow me into the empty apartment. Once inside, I gestured for her to sit. She obeyed, her hands trembling. The apartment, filled with echoes of the past memories of childhood laughter, birthday celebrations, and summer vacations, seemed to amplify the gravity of the moment. Angela, I began slowly, you have underestimated me. You have manipulated me, lied to me, and tried to erase me from your life. But everything you believed was yours, legally or otherwise, is no longer under your control. Tears streamed down her face as reality began to settle. Mom, I didn't know. I didn't think you did know, I said firmly. You just chose to ignore it. You chose greed over love, convenience over compassion. And now, you are facing the consequences. Edward tried to speak, but I silenced him with a single glance. The room was mine. Every document, every legal maneuver, every plan Robert and I had set in motion ensured that I held the ultimate power. That afternoon, Mr. Peterson delivered letters I had prepared for both Angela and Edward. The words were precise, clear, and firm. The letters outlined every consequence of their actions: restitution of misused funds, the transfer of control back to me, and the clear legal consequences if they attempted to challenge me. Angela read her letter first, her face pale. Every word felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. Mom, I understand now. I watched her carefully, noting the subtle shift in her demeanor. Fear, respect, and humility had replaced arrogance and entitlement. For the first time, she realized that her actions had a lasting impact, not just on her life but on the lives of those she claimed to love. Edward, on the other hand, struggled to grasp the reality. His frustration was palpable, but his attempts to regain control were futile. Every move he had made had been anticipated, every strategy countered, every document secured. He was trapped in his own web of deception, and I held the strings. Over the next week, I observed him closely. Angela began to show subtle signs of change. She apologized not just with words but with actions. She offered to assist with property management, acknowledged her mistakes, and slowly began to rebuild a relationship founded on respect rather than entitlement. Edward remained distant, but even he began to realize that the power dynamic had irrevocably shifted. The loans he had taken against the properties were nullified, the debts reclaimed under my authority, and every attempt at manipulation was countered with strategic precision. I maintained my appearances in the neighborhood, still the fragile widow to the world, but behind closed doors, I was a force to be reckoned with. The duality of my life, innocuous and seemingly weak by day, decisive and powerful by afternoon, kept Angela and Edward constantly off balance. One evening, as I sat on the porch overlooking the city lights, Angela approached me. Her voice was soft, tentative, and sincere. Mom, I want to make things right. I know I hurt you. I see now what I did, and I want to be a better daughter. I studied her carefully. The sincerity was there, but it had to be tested. Actions speak louder than words. Angela, you will have the chance to prove yourself. Respect the rules, follow the process, and perhaps, one day, you can regain my trust. She nodded, tears glistening in her eyes. I will, Mom. I promise. It was a beginning, a fragile, tentative first step toward reconciliation. As days turned into weeks, the city continued its rhythm, oblivious to the personal storm that had just passed in my household. I managed the properties, ensured the legal processes were airtight, and slowly guided Angela in understanding the responsibilities she had once ignored. Edward, realizing he was powerless, withdrew quietly, leaving Angela to face her lessons alone. I walked through my house, touching the familiar furniture, the photographs of Robert and Angela, the memories that had once been taken for granted. Each item was a reminder of the past, a symbol of resilience, and a testament to the fact that no one, neither greed nor betrayal, could erase a life built on love and sacrifice. That night, as I prepared for bed, I looked in the mirror and saw not just a widow, not just a mother, but a woman who had reclaimed her power, her dignity, and her legacy. Robert's voice echoed in my mind. It's about time, my love. It's about time you stood up for yourself. And I had. The morning sun poured through the curtains, golden and warm, a reminder that each day carries new possibilities. I woke with a sense of calm purpose, the kind that comes not from ignorance or denial, but from understanding that you have weathered the storm and emerged stronger. For months, I had played the dual roles of the grieving widow and the silent strategist. Now, I was ready for the final chapter, the restoration of everything Robert and I had built, and the revelation that true strength lies not in wealth alone, but in wisdom, patience, and integrity. I brewed my coffee slowly, savoring the rich aroma. The house felt different today. It was no longer the home of a passive widow, abandoned and deceived. It was a house of authority, of strategy, of quiet victory. I moved through the rooms deliberately, touching the old furniture, the photographs of happier times, the souvenirs of years spent building a life that no one, not even my daughter, could diminish. Angela had begun to change in subtle but undeniable ways. Gone was the confident, entitled young woman who had taken what she wanted without hesitation. In her place was someone tentative, reflective, and humbled by the consequences of her choices. She had started helping me with property management, showing genuine concern for tenants, asking questions about finances, and even volunteering to learn the legal intricacies I had mastered. One afternoon, she approached me while I was reviewing the documents for the downtown apartment building. "Mom," she said softly, "I know I have no right to ask, but I want to make amends. I want to understand, really understand, what Robert and you worked for all these years." I studied her, noting the sincerity in her eyes, the absence of the arrogance that had once dominated her expression. "Angela," I replied carefully, "the first step to earning trust is understanding responsibility. You will learn not because you want to, but because you must. Life has a way of teaching lessons we refuse to accept easily." Her head bowed, tears brimming. "I will, Mom. I promise." It was a start, not forgiveness, not reconciliation, but the beginning of a transformation that could reshape the future of our family. Edward, on the other hand, remained distant. The collapse of his schemes and the nullification of his loans had left him bitter and frustrated, but he was powerless to fight back. I observed him carefully, recognizing the first signs of humility creeping into his demeanor. Even he could see that his wife's mother, the woman he had once dismissed, had outmaneuvered him at every turn. The building where they lived, now fully under my control, became a symbol of authority and oversight. Angela was learning to manage it properly. Edward was learning to respect limits, and I finally felt the peace that comes from seeing justice restored. One of the final pieces of my silent victory was Robert's beloved Ford truck. I had always treasured it as the last tangible memory of him, and Angela had taken it under false pretenses. Mr. Peterson arranged for its return, negotiating discreetly with the buyer. The day the truck arrived back at my driveway, I ran my hands over its polished hood, inhaled the familiar scent of leather and Robert's cologne, and allowed myself a private smile. This was more than a vehicle. It was a testament to patience, foresight, and the power of strategy. Angela approached, awkwardly, unsure how to act. "Mom, you will learn," I said gently, "that love and respect cannot be bought, borrowed, or coerced. They must be earned, and that begins with honesty." The final restoration came with the beach house. I visited it alone, taking the bus along the same route Robert and I had traveled for decades. Sitting across the street, I watched the house bathed in the golden glow of the afternoon sun. Memories flooded back. Angela as a child building sandcastles, Robert grilling fish on the barbecue, the laughter that had once filled every corner. It was more than a property, it was a sanctuary, a living archive of love, sacrifice, and family. And now, it was mine again. The legal processes had been completed quietly, efficiently, leaving Angela and Edward powerless to dispute the transfer. That evening, as I sat with Angela, we spoke honestly for the first time in years. She admitted her mistakes, expressed genuine remorse, and promised to rebuild our relationship on trust and respect. Edward listened silently, acknowledging his missteps without complaint. I realized something crucial. Justice is not merely about reclaiming what was stolen. It is about teaching lessons, guiding growth, and ensuring that power is understood, respected, and used wisely. In reclaiming my properties, I had not only restored my wealth, but also reshaped the dynamics of my family, turning arrogance into humility and recklessness into responsibility. The city lights sparkled outside my window that night, each one a reminder that life continues, unpredictable and vibrant. I sat with my coffee, reflecting on the journey, the grief, the betrayal, the strategy, and finally, the victory. Robert's words echoed in my heart. "It's about time, my love. It's about time you stood up for yourself." And I had. Angela had begun her path of redemption. Edward had learned the consequences of arrogance. and I had reclaimed not just wealth, but dignity, authority, and peace. The lessons of the past were now woven into the fabric of our lives, guiding every decision, every word, and every action. That night, I walked through my home. Touching the familiar furniture and photographs, I smiled at the memories, honored the sacrifices, and felt the quiet strength that comes from knowing you have faced betrayal and emerged victorious. The road had been long, filled with pain and deceit, but the outcome was a testament to patience, resilience, and unwavering determination. Angela approached me one last time that evening. "Mom, I don't know if I can ever fully make up for what I did, but I will spend the rest of my life trying." I nodded, a faint smile on my lips. "Actions, not words, Angela. Let your actions show your remorse and your growth. Only then will trust be rebuilt." And with that, I finally felt a sense of completion. The past was reconciled, the present secured, and our future was now in capable hands.